This is going to be our first video on waves, and what we're going to look at is just to see how a wave actually looks and to be able to label it and understand what some of these words mean: amplitude, wavelength and frequency. First of all, we're going to start off with something called the peak of the wave, and you can see that I've marked that there as a peak. Now the peak of the wave is going to be the top, and as we go down, that is going to be called the trough, just like a pig's trough. Yeah. And there's another peak and there's another trough over there. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at what amplitude means. Now amplitude is the distance, and this distance is measured in meters, from the peak, so from the highest point down to this resting position, and you can see that the resting position is halfway between that wave. So if this is the entire length, the resting position is halfway through there, and when you measure amplitude, you measure it from the very top of the peak to that resting period. Do not make the mistake of measuring it from there to there. That is incorrect. It has got to be from the peak to the resting point there. Now, you can either measure it from there to there, or you can measure it from there to there. It's going to be exactly the same distance. Please make sure, though, that you always measure this in meters, and sometimes these numbers can be quite small, but you have got to convert them to meters first. So that is what amplitude means, from there to there, or there to there. Okay, so I've marked that on there for you. There's the amplitude there, between there and there. The next thing we're going to look at is wavelength, and wavelength is actually from one peak to another peak. And if you look carefully, you can actually see that it is one full cycle of a wave. So from the top down to the bottom, straight back up to the top again. Now obviously you can do that. It's going to be the same distance whether you measure it from there, one complete cycle, or in fact even if you measure it from there, it's one complete cycle. Okay, so that is what we mean when we speak about wavelength. Usually what we would do is we would find the two peaks and then measure the distance from there to there, and that would be the wavelength. Once again, this is done in meters, so be very, very careful. Make sure you check those units first. Okay, the next thing we're going to do, guys, is we're going to look at frequency. Frequency is how many waves pass a certain point in a second. So if this line represents our time, and that is a second, we can say that the frequency of this wave is 2 waves per second. So 2 waves go past a certain point in 1 second. If I were to increase the frequency, what would happen is I would need to have more waves along the same line, because remember, this line represents a second. So I'm going to try and draw this in. As you all know, I'm not brilliant at drawing, but I'm going to give it a go. Okay, so like that. Whoops, that's not very good. Okay, but can you see that there are actually 3? Oy, that's not good. There are 3 crests going through there, 3 waves. So the blue line that I've just drawn in would actually have a higher frequency, and as you can see, if it's got a higher frequency, that wavelength is going to get shorter and smaller. Okay guys, so that brings us to the end of this video. The next video we're going to look at the wave equation that looks at the relationship between the speed of the wave, how quickly that wave is moving, its frequency and its wavelength.